I wanted the Beatles thing to end. I felt as though I couldn't breathe if it went on any longer. We got this phone call that there was a rock and roll revival show, and that Chuck was going to be there, and Jerry Lee was going to be there, and up the great rockers who were still living. The Doors were top of the bill.
There were a lot of historic things happened that night.
The ninth wonder of the world, Alice Cooper!
A lot of tension going on.
The excitement was amazing.
This was far too much ahead of its time.
The music was important. You could see they were digging it.
If you watch the old guys, when they hit that stage, they brought it like it's the last show you're ever going to do.
The guys that originated everything, the heroes.
The week before the show, tickets were not selling. All of a sudden, the show's going to be canceled.
Is John Brower calling?
And we would like to invite John and Yoko to be the MCs.
Sounds not good, this Canadian thing.
If John Lennon doesn't show up, I am ruined.
Pulled up with our bikes up front of the airport. Big long line of bikes. We've escorted John Lennon in.
People were going crazy.
I had not experienced something like that before.
The combination of people on the stage is, without question, historic.
It was almost a non-event until all of a sudden it was the biggest thing in the world.
Then he resigned the day we'll never have him resign.
I was thinking, there's John Lennon, hasn't played for years, hasn't been on stage for years, and then suddenly he goes with no rehearsal with a band that never played together before. And does a concert. That was scary. And I thought, well, he must know what he's doing.
Okay, we're just going to do numbers that we know, because we've never played together before.
So no sound check, no rehearsal, no nothing. And that's the way it sounds, too. And so we just started playing, and it was very weird at first. I couldn't hear Eric, I couldn't hear John. The monitor system, it was really very, very hard. So, people now see those Toronto concerts, they have to really think of what a tough job that was. It was really hard.
Thank you.
The audience loved it. It was great. Most of the people on a concert, they still know of the old Beatles. They would have loved to hear all the old Beatle tracks, and he didn't do that. They loved to see John anyway.
Glass Onion. John Lennon.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 101 of Glass Onion on John Lennon. And considering that I've been threatening to quit almost since day one, that's not a bad achievement. With me today, very, very happy to have Dave Thurmaier of the I've Got a Beatles podcast. Now, Dave is here right at the beginning of Glass Onion. In fact, March 2019. I was just looking through the archive. Yeah, we did a kind of a general chat. And then a year later, we did one of the John Lennon in series, which was 1970. So we talked about the year, and then we talked about, obviously, John and Yoko's massive amount of activity, which is most of their years, let's be honest. Anyway, Dave, welcome back. How have you been?
Thanks. It's great to be back here. Doing well. The podcast is still going, still rolling. We've just finished our 235th episode of I've Got a Beatles podcast. So if you've gotten over 100, I think that's a big hump. And congrats on getting over 100. And I'm really happy to be back here for number 101.
Thank you very much. Yes. When did you start your show? You've done 10 years, haven't you? Is that right?
Yeah, we started in, I want to say April of 2012. Yeah, it's been a while. It was Chris and I, my co-host, we were college buddies, and so we used to make these lists together of 10 worst McCartney songs or 5 best Lennon lyrics or things like that when we were in college. And then we kept in touch all these years, and then podcasts became a thing. And so we said, hey, what the heck? Let's just try it out, see what happens, and started our podcast back then and still going at it. It's been so much fun to do and meet so many people like you and many others along the way that we never would have met probably any other way. So it's fun.
Yeah, well, you were on episode 1 in a way, because
yeah,
on the very first episode, I went through all the Beatles podcasts. At that time, there were 10. Now there's probably about 450. Maybe. I don't know how many, but
at least.
Yeah, there was a sort of manageable number back in 2000.
There was.
So you got mentioned, and obviously, something about the Beatles, all the other ones when there was Fab.
You know, I don't really listen much to other Beatle podcasts. I think Chris, I blame Chris because he, we would do reviews of things, and I'd say, oh, I listened to so-and-so's podcast. And he said, don't do that. It's going to cloud your judgment, or it's going to, change the way you think. You should just approach it fresh. But it's not that I don't want to. I just, I don't know, there's too many other things to listen to. But in my feed, I get these new ones every once in a while, and I'm kind of curious to see if they'll last. Because you look, there were some that were really popular 10 years ago that had a run for a couple of years and then just faded out at episode 42 and stopped. We have a philosophy of slow and steady wins the race. So in our episodes, we never are the first to review something. We don't do the hot takes. We try to really sit with something a while and really think about it before we go on the air to talk about it.
And we're never really going to run out of topics, I suppose. I mean, I'm just doing John Lennon. I mean, this is John Lennon / Beatles, I'd say. Obviously, I do general shows, but it doesn't seem like you're ever going to run out of material, really.
No, we thought we were going to at one point. We thought, how much can you say? There are hundreds of books about the Beatles and Lennon, and how much more can you say? But it's like I had a U.S. history teacher once who said, you'll never run out of things to say about Abe Lincoln. Right. There's always stuff about fascinating, consequential figures like Lincoln or the Beatles, or you'll always find a new angle or new take, something to say.
Yeah, I think also as well, some of my listeners and other people always ask me, do you listen to their albums and stuff? And I don't really need to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Obviously, when a new version comes out, we'll talk about a Lennon album in a second that's just come out in a different version. And taking a break from it, I mean, I don't really follow news feeds of Beatles that much because I think I started to get this fatigue a long time ago. And the only way to get over it is just to not be constantly absorbed by it.
Mm-hmm.
But the music, I never get tired of that, really.
Oh, no, but I'm kind of like you. People say, oh, don't you listen to you must listen to the Beatles all the time. I said, I don't really need to. It's already in us so much. But I will say, when you go back, like on a podcast, if we're talking about, we do this series called Song Under the Microscope, where we just take one really in depth and you go back to I Should Have Known Better or something. And it's like, oh, wow, that's such a great song. It really is a good song or something, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You come back to it. It's always like an old friend when you're coming back to the Beatles.
Yeah. It's funny. All you need to do is just take a bit of a break from it, especially whenever I go. I believe you went to Liverpool, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Whenever I go to Liverpool, I wander down Matthew Street and there's invariably a band, either a busker or there's a band at the Cavern doing their songs, and hearing them live as well, especially like when you hear stuff like, I don't know, I'll Get You or
the early stuff.
Truffle. Yeah, one of my golden memories. We need to get on the topic soon.
Yeah. No, it's fun.
No tangents, kids, apart from mine. Back in 1995, I went to Liverpool for the first time, and I was actually with the first love of my life. So it was a real magic weekend. And we did the what's now Beatle Week. I think it was then Beatles Weekend. It's probably gradually morphed from being like one afternoon to a day to a weekend to a week, And I remember the very first song that was being played when I walked in by a tribute band was Savoy Truffle.
Oh, wow.
And I thought we really entered a new phase of Beatles tribute bands, that it's not just She Loves You and our Cardan Jackets. People are tackling the less known stuff.
Deep cuts. Yeah.
Yeah. Very briefly, what was your highlight of when you were in Liverpool? If you think of your trip to Liverpool, what's the one thing?
Yeah, oh gosh. Well, I've been to Liverpool twice. The first was in 2001 and then 2022. And I'd say the highlight was going to John and Paul's houses because they weren't open in 2001. So that was an amazing tour. I got to play Paul's piano. There's some pictures of us on our. Yeah, you got to play too. We weren't supposed to. Well, the guy actually said, okay, you can play, but no photos. But then the tour guide left and I asked some guy, hey, here's my phone. Would you take a picture of me playing Paul's piano? And so we did.
Funny you say that because I should whisper this, but I took a photo of myself in John Lennon's bedroom. Yeah.
Surely they know that people are going to do that. But those were really special moments, especially standing up in John's bedroom when everyone else was and the tour was downstairs and it was just me in John's bedroom. And oh, wow, this is ground zero for so much here.
Wow, that's so funny you say that because that's what I did. I've done the tour about 6 times.
Oh wow!
And the last three times I've waited for everyone to go downstairs. And the first time I did it, I was quite a young man, and I did the old "Come on, John, help."
Yeah, come on, John.
Come on, give me a song, a lyric, a snatch of melody, some life advice. Come on, mate, you believe in spirits,
yell at
don't
me.
You?
Yeah, yell at me or something. Tell me to f off or sod off or
Yeah, but before you said that, I was thinking, of all the things in Liverpool, that has raised the bar. That tour.
Yeah.
Because, it's great. I mean, I was in India in 2019. I was in Delhi, which is close, in inverted commas, to Rishikesh, close in terms of India. And I thought, should I go? And then I read a few reviews, and there's not really any kind of evidence that they were there. Not obviously, we know they were there, but there's no thing you can hang it on. But these tours, they've got original fixtures, obviously. And furniture, and they've got little items because I think the house next door to John's had been, or maybe Paul's, had been kept in almost the same state for decades. So they could take pictures of it and use that.
Did you have there was an older guy who did the Lennon tour, and he said he'd been a lifelong resident and of that area, and he seemed to know everything. So I don't know if he was still there.
Every time I've gone, it's been a different person.
Oh, okay.
I know who you mean. I can't think of what his name is. I think his name's Colin.
Yeah, Colin, I think that's right. He was great.
He did the book with Colin Hanton, who was in The Quarrymen.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I went round to Colin Hanton's house. We could do hours just talk about this, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I went round to Colin Hanton's house, and he still lived in Penny Lane. And the weird thing was, he's still married to the girl who he was married to when they did the In Spite of All the Danger, That'll Be the Day recording.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, they've worked out the date of that now. It was actually 3 days before Julia Lennon died, which is really bizarre.
That is.
Because in the film, it's 3 days or 2 days after.
Yeah.
Because he uses the money that Julia left him to pay for the recording. Fair enough, artistic license. Yeah. But Colin said, I remember it's a Saturday because I had to meet my girlfriend. And then 10 minutes later, the doorbell rings. And Colin Hanton's 81 or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the same woman.
Oh, wow.
No, not the doorbell. Sorry, the key. She doesn't need to ring the doorbell. The key went in the door. And he said, oh, hello, love. And I was like, is that the same woman who you had to meet after you did that recording? It was like, wow.
Yeah. That's cool.
Insane. I always love going to Liverpool. Right. What I'd like to do, fairly quick fire.
Yeah.
Because there's been quite a few things going on in the last, year or so. Now and then, song and video. I know I'm sure you did a show about it. I probably
we did.
But briefly, what do you think?
Because you gave me a little heads up that we were going to talk about it. So I did go back and listen and watch them again because I really hadn't listened to them or watched the video at all since we did our podcast about them. Yeah. And I was thinking, well, maybe my opinion will change. I was more mixed about it. I think Chris, my podcast partner, he was more positive than I was. I'm getting more and more to the point where I want the Beatles to not be a museum piece, but to kind of let it be to be punny here. It stands on its own so well. I don't think we need to keep messing around and trying all these new things. Now, remastering, remixing, different story maybe, but a new song, I listened to it again and it sounds like what I said on our podcast. I said it sounds like a McCartney 2000 solo song. It's very McCartney heavy. And I was noticing more of John's sort of it's not as creepy as Free as a Bird or Real Love, but still it's like, it's not totally, it's been processed, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I think it made people happy. The video was kind of interesting with the mixtures of old and young and having John and George together and Paul and Ringo together. And I liked the video more the first couple times I saw it, but it's kind of gotten a little, it doesn't bear repeated listenings or watchings, but I would say mixed overall.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, obviously the whole thing was built on a slight untruth that it was a new Beatles song. But what's really interesting, I don't know if you find this, whenever there's new Beatles product like this, and not necessarily remasters, but a quote unquote new song, there's a huge audience who are casual Beatles fans. We think, not saying you, but I'm saying sometimes we might think that the majority of people in the world are like massive Beatles fans. Actually, they're not.
No.
They're casual Beatles fans. So what was interesting was that I always tend to look at the marketing angle because I always find marketing very interesting. And the thing I said on my show, I did about 15 minutes on it as a part of an intro. My sister sent me a text message. My sister is a fairly casual Beatles fan. And she said she'd been in tears after listening to it on the radio. And of course, the first thing I said was, is it really that bad? But then I said, God, that's weird, because that seems almost like a bit of a, I don't mean to patronize my sister, but a bit of a programmed reaction, almost as if there's something in the song that's kind of meant to evoke that. And obviously the DJs are going to build it up and everything.
Last Beatles song and all that stuff.
But I thought I don't know, I think it's pretty average. It's fine. It's okay.
I agree with you. We are the exceptions here. We're the diehards.
The minority.
The minority. Exactly. So I did have people, even casual, like my mother, or people were, oh, wasn't that really interesting? Or wasn't that great to hear John again? And like, but there's something kind of off about it. It's not new. And Ken Womack, the historian, I believe I heard him say this once. He said, well, the Beatles marketing and their whole apparatus likes to reinvent history and retell. They keep reshaping the narrative and reframing the narrative. And I think this is another case of that here, where you've got, this song was left, and we supposedly because George didn't like it, or maybe it was because the sound wasn't good, or it just didn't happen or something. But now the story is, look what Paul did and Ringo did. They just brought it back to life, and Peter Jackson, and it just gets framed now in a way that's just like your sister, like it's meant to pull at the heartstrings.
I mean, I do life coaching, and reframing in a positive way is such a massive part of it. You can take the same event, you could see it in a negative light, you can see it in a positive light. But that reframing idea is really interesting. It's because that's really because of the internet, marketing has become this much more kind of intense thing. You can obviously reach so many people, and you start to wonder how much of what we're seeing is real and how much is just marketing. It's like right, briefly, Let It Be, the new film, obviously not as gloomy, literally not as gloomy as it was.
Yeah.
How did that change the experience, do you think?
I have to be honest, I haven't seen the new version, actually. So Chris, because I know. I've seen it so many times on my old crummy first VHS, then DVD. So I've seen it a lot, but I didn't want to get Disney Plus again and subscribe. So I'll wait till it hopefully comes out on DVD or Blu-ray. But I'm glad that I never thought it was that gloomy. I thought it was cool because it was the only Beatle movie that showed them in real life, actually recording and playing and performing, because the others were not quite like that. So I loved it. And the rooftop, who didn't like the rooftop concert?
God, brilliant.
Yeah. And those 3 formal dressed up songs that they do right before the rooftop. So I'll be excited to see the cleaned up version, especially now we've had the Get Back film. You can see the full, it makes more sense, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, literally it was more gloomy. The actual print.
The quality was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. It just made everything look darker, and you did evoke that sort of idea of them, because they were clearly all night owls, and the idea of they had to turn up at 10 or whatever time they turned up.
Yeah,
you've got that idea of them being a bit kind of drowsy in the mornings and stuff.
Well, and you see John Lennon. They're yawning in there and stuff. Yeah.
But it's quite a different experience. And I think I said on my show that having Get Back as this 8.5 hour, almost definitive, not quite definitive, but somewhere near definitive. Let It Be is like a sort of weird cousin, like it's a bit random with absolutely no explanation for anything.
That's true.
The only bit that kind of irritated me a bit was they took off the bit just after John does the famous Parsley audition. They had a nice little bit of Get Back.
Yeah.
John sort of Get Back, get together. And
with
improvising.
Paul going,
yeah. And they took that out. I don't know why, really. I wasn't offended. I just thought, what's the point? It's like changing I Am the Walrus on the Blue Album. I didn't sleep over it. I just thought, what's the point? I mean,
what's the point?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway.
No, I look forward to seeing it.
Right. But have you listened to the new Mind Games? And have you listened to any of the...
More than I've ever wanted to. We just released our 235th episode. Was a deep dive, quite long review of the Mind Games set that just came out last month, and it raises some of the same questions we were just talking about. With instead of the Beatles being in charge, this time it's Sean Lennon taking the reins here, and is he trying to make what many people would probably consider, and we do too, a middle of the road, I don't want to say mediocre, but not top tier Lennon album, and then turning it into this unsung masterpiece with
it's that framing again, isn't it?
It's the framing again, yeah, with a $1,350 box set, very expensive 6 CD one, and every little thing. So, lots another Beatle pun here.
They're everywhere.
They are. We had a good discussion. I think the remix is pretty good overall. Some of it I didn't think was great because the songs were kind of weak, and I thought that John's big reverby Spectre production actually helped some of the songs. You don't always want things stripped down because it shows their flaws sometimes more clearly. But Out the Blue is still a tremendously great song, and
the one I love is You Are Here.
Yeah, You Are Here. We like
so
that.
Gorgeous. It's just gorgeous.
Beautiful musically.
Yeah. Gorgeous is the word I kept coming up with.
Yeah.
There's two or three. One Day at a Time, Out the Blue, You Are Here. We did a show years and years ago called John Lennon's Worst Songs, and Only People was on that list.
God, yeah. That's pretty bad.
Really bad, yeah. But I found, I did listen to I don't know if it was the Elements or the Elemental. I scooped up whatever was online, basically.
Yeah.
And I like hearing those individual bits. I think David Spinoza is fantastic. Of course, David Spinoza, as well as a session fee, got an extra bonus for playing on that album. But anyway.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, he had an affair with Yoko. I'm only saying that because that's pretty much fact. But yeah.
Anyway,
but he did great work. Yeah.
That's interesting. You learned something new here. As we were talking about, you never run out of things to talk about.
Yeah.
But we thought that album, I really think that album was so different because of its sound. It was like having David Spinoza, having all these New York guys instead of the old gang like Klaus and Ringo or whoever, Phil Spector people. This was all American guys. And so it's a very different kind of feel and sound. I like Walls and Bridges more, but there are still some good tunes on Mind Games. It was just a lot to get through. It's a lot to listen to.
I suppose it stands out as the most conventional. It's just a John Lennon pop album. Some good, some not so good. It's okay, I think Walls and Bridges suffers because it could be seen, this is a framing again, as a kind of Plastic Ono Band light. So it's still personal songs, but not quite with the same bite. But I really like Walls and Bridges, and Mind Games has got a bit of the personal. Obviously, I think the Yoko stuff maybe doesn't ring as true just because they were just about to split up. That was
right. That's a great point because I brought up we disagreed on I See Musen or I'm Sorry. I thought the lyrics were very simpy and
that's
kind
not
of
the John Lennon I like. Forgive me, my little flower princess.
Yeah.
It's like,
right. It's like,
that was on Milk and Honey.
Yeah, like no, that's not the Yoko-san and the Japanese. It just didn't. It was kind of cringy. but I think it would get better a little bit later. So
yeah. And just one final tangent. Actually, two very, very quick things. Somebody sent me an interview. It's either early 75, and there was one early 76 as well with John. And what's amazing about it, I think it's early 75, just after he'd moved back in. You know, we know about the smoking cure. Various theories about that. But it's amazing how quickly him and Yoko have got their 1980 sort of shtick already in place.
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked him about May, and he says, "Oh yeah, May was a nice girl." You know, it's like she'd just gone out of his life about 2 weeks earlier, and he's just moved on so quickly. And I don't know if that makes him like a terrible person, or is it just because when you're famous you have to compartmentalize and you have to move on quickly? I don't know what it is, but it's just because you're saying like new stuff comes up, and every now and again on YouTube I plug in John Lennon interview just to see if there's anything new.
Yeah.
Occasionally there are. Ones that I haven't heard, but it's that's one of the things that obviously I've discovered more and more doing this podcast for 5.5 years, I think. You know, it's the thing that makes him interesting is just how quickly he can just move from one thing to another and then just not look back at all, almost.
Well, and to that point, did you see the May Pang movie?
Yeah. I did a sort of mini review. I'll say what I said then. I liked it. I felt like she was a bit if I use the word desperate, that sounds terrible. Can you think of a nicer word than desperate? Get your thesauruses out, people.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
No, because there was a bit where he mentioned her name and it was captioned, and it was almost as if she has to acknowledge. And fair enough, you know. Okay, she's probably feels like she got airbrushed out the story, and she totally did. You know, the Coleman story, obviously the Goldman story is different, but that was good, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's good at least to see, even if you know it's biased because it's her take on everything. But she's someone we hadn't really heard from she wrote a book, I know, but you know, recently, kind of looking at things. And I don't know what you think about if you mentioned this, but the rumor that she only did it now because Yoko's kind of incapacitated and can't really fight back.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Well, I would say that Sean seems to have just fallen in seamlessly into that role of just, you know, official version, Lennon estate, official version.
Totally.
Sort of a bit disappointing for me, but I still hold out hope that we'll get that Prisoner of Love, you know, the Peter Doggett book.
Yeah, I hope so too. He's a great writer.
Yeah, he is. I think Robert Rodriguez and I individually just trying to will that into existence, you know. Come on, you know. And
come on, make it happen.
He did an interview with Mike Tree. I know you said you didn't listen to many Beatles podcasts. You should listen to that. There's some crazy stuff. He was like a gardener, wasn't he? That's why.
Yeah,
John
I remember that name.
Mike Tree, and he had a book suppressed as well. Yeah, but he had some wild stuff in that interview. Anyway, what we're going to talk about? Oh yeah, Toronto. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there was another thing. Oh my God. Final thing, I promise. Right, Dave. July the 6th this year was a Saturday. Now, you as a hardcore Beatles fan, if I said Saturday, July the 6th, what would come into your mind?
Oh, well, that's the day it all happened. That's where John met Paul, which going to Liverpool is an exciting place because I went to the church and I went to the wrong place at first. And then I asked some guy, some worker's like, it's over there. But important date at the,
Well, the weird thing was this year, Saturday was July the 6th. And me being a bit of a stats nerd, I thought, I wonder how many Saturdays it was since they met.
Oh, yeah.
And weirdly enough, it was exactly 3,500.
Whoa.
Yeah. If you just think about that for a sec, 3,000. It's so weird that it was a round number like that.
Round number.
500 Saturdays since John.
Not 3,501.
Yeah. But yeah, that was good. Yeah. I'm quite obsessed with that day. There's a good book called The Day John Met Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great book.
Yeah. Rod Davis did the audio book. He was right at the beginning of Glass Onion, episode 3 and 4. I might try and track that down sometime. Don't know if it's on Audible. Not sure. Anyway, right, everybody. Are we all sitting comfortably? Toronto, 1969. Toronto Rock and Roll Revival. We covered this to some extent on the John Lennon Live show I did. But I want to do a proper deep dive. And I was partly prompted, I think it was last year, by a documentary that you hadn't seen either called Revival 69. Just fantastic documentary. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at the concert, firstly through that documentary, and then we're going to look at Sweet Toronto, which I'm sure we've both seen many, many times. So I'll just go through some of the details. So 12-hour festival, Saturday, September the 13th, 1969, at Varsity Stadium, which is a football stadium at the University of Toronto, called by some, quote, the second most important event in rock and roll history. Going to ask you about that.
Hyperbole.
Yeah. Well, one revelation. Were you aware that there was a festival in June in the same stadium?
No.
I had no idea.
No
I don't
idea.
think it's mentioned. I don't know if it was mentioned on the documentary or I was just researching. Yeah, weirdly enough, just what was that, June? So 3 months earlier, there'd been the Toronto Pop Festival, which actually predated Woodstock.
Because Woodstock was August 3rd, 4th, 5th or something. Yeah.
Definitely August, yeah. Let's just quickly talk about this second most important event. I mean, I wouldn't even call it really the second most important festival when you got Monterey. My question for you, if John Lennon wasn't in it, do you think people would know much about this? I mean, even, let's say, casual Beatles fans, if someone said Toronto 1969, other than Lennon, what do you think? Would people know this concert?
No, I think it's turned the other way. It's sort of like when you say Toronto 69, the only person you think about is Lennon, even though, as the movie talks about, and John Lennon himself said, the Doors were actually the main attraction. And so nowadays, no, I don't think if John was involved, which, like you said, that documentary was fascinating because we'll talk about it, but so many things I had no idea about of just getting John there was a saga. But no, it's now Live Peace in Toronto is attached to John.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into it, obviously, but it's just so memorable. So the two films, Sweet Toronto, actually came out in 1971. I didn't realize it was
really
soon. It was part of my sort of Beatles education, I think the late 80s.
Yeah.
Made by D.A. Pennebaker. I mean, we don't need to talk about how amazing he is, Don't Look Back and all the other ones he made. And then this one, Revival 69, the concert that rocked the world, made by Ron Chapman in 2022. And thank you to my friend Luke Thompson for getting me onto this, because I would not have heard of it, I don't think, otherwise. Ron Chapman, was given Pennebaker's original 16mm film in its entirety for use in his film. The lineup, if you watch any Beatles documentaries, I'm sure you've seen Complete Beatles, probably like me, about 300 times.
Oh, yeah. That was still the best.
Yeah, it's such a place in my heart. I'll never hear a word against it. You always hear about these 50s people. It's always the same. It's the same list, isn't it? Chuck, Buddy, Jerry Lee, Carl Perkins, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent. Who would you say the top tier of that lot, either objectively or just in your opinion? Obviously Elvis. So.
Yeah, Elvis would be.
Elvis, yeah.
And it's probably conventional wisdom to say, but I do think Chuck Berry was probably the big draw or the top name. Although Little Richard could also be, because he's so outrageous. And hadn't he stopped playing for a while too? But I got to go with Chuck just because of his. Well, he's such a colorful figure too, and with his sordid personal life and arrests and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it was Chuck or Bo Diddley or any of the others? I don't know.
I would probably say. I mean, I've got something to say about Bo Diddley, the song. I think it's in Sweet Toronto. Just the fact of how minimalist it is, but I still love it. I'd probably say Chuck and Buddy Holly for biting, obviously. Little Richard, they often say Elvis is the king of rock and roll and Little Richard's the queen of rock and roll. That's not meant in a nasty way. It's just a bit of a joke. And I think Gene Vincent, I don't think he wrote his own songs. Carl Perkins obviously did. Honestly, I listened to Carl Perkins' greatest hits, and it sounds like the same song 20 times.
It is.
Which is fine, because I like that song. That's the point.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think he was more influential. Well, if you ask George Harrison as a guitar player, I think he was more important for that than Honey Don't or Matchbox, which, they are all kind of all the same song.
Yeah, but that's fine, But on this show, we've got Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Gene Vincent, and Bo Diddley. If you look into their personal lives, you said sordid. That clip of him singing My Ding-a-Ling is just bizarre. Totally bizarre. And there's stories, of course, the Beatles in Tune In, that, of course, they backed Little Richard and they met Gene Vincent.
Right.
Was there another story? Gene Vincent had a gun and said to George Harrison, I'm just about to blow my girlfriend's brains out or something like that. And George was like, "Oh, I'll leave you to that then." Yeah, something like that. But
he was kind of a nut. Yeah.
All these people. I mean, I don't know about maybe Carl Perkins. Maybe wasn't like that. And
no, Buddy Holly seemed fairly normal.
Oh yeah,
he was so young. I mean, he died. I can't believe he died when he was 22, something. Yeah. I mean, he was such a young man, but he seemed pretty normal.
Yeah, I mean, even Elvis is probably a bit of a choir boy compared to this lot.
Yeah.
Some of the other people that were in the show, Chicago, Alice Cooper. We'll talk about that later. They had their own set, and they also backed Gene Vincent, or some of them. There was a bit of that going on, wasn't there? Different people backing. Screaming Lord Sutch, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's head of the Monster Raving Loony political party in England. No. They just enter every election, or they used to, just to stir things up, basically. Plastic Ono Band, and then, as you said, headliners, The Doors, who refused to be filmed. We've only got audio. Not totally sure why. Maybe it was Jim Morrison, not sure. Yeah. John Lennon was supposed to be MC to boost flagging ticket sales, but insisted on playing. Now, should we talk about what it took to get John Lennon there? Let's talk about that. So he gets a call on Friday night, I believe.
Yeah. So that documentary, which I can't recommend highly enough, because you get interviews with. There were two young organizers at the time, and one of them is still alive, and the other is. His story is told through archives. Yeah, it's basically like two idealistic kids. As these things, the Woodstock guy, Michael Lang, they all seem to be that kind of guy in the 60s, just like, hey, let's have a festival and let's have John Lennon. Yeah, why not? Let's just do it. And so they start making the calls, and like you said, so it's a Friday night, I think, and they get the contact for Apple. And they're trying to connect, and who answered the phone? It was the assistant.
Anthony Fawcett.
Anthony Fawcett. Yeah, he answers the phone. He's like, who are these guys? I don't know who this is. Yeah. John, do you want to talk to him? No. All right, forget it. So it's kind of this cat and mouse game for a while. And then eventually, somehow, they're on the phone, and he agrees to do it, but it's with such short notice.
Yeah, but what happens the next morning? He wakes up probably like stoned from the night before.
So stoned. He's like, I'm a little bit. I'm not doing it. We're not going. Yeah,
I'm a bit tired. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, everybody.
Sorry, everybody. Is that kind of thing? Didn't he say I'll send you some flowers, or I'll send you? Like he'll send you some gifts or something. But sorry about that. We're not going to make it.
Yeah, I did read. Because I have a soft spot for the Goldman book. Yeah, the tone is very bitchy and everything, but I think it's been slightly maligned over the years. Someone went ballistic down the phone. Was it to John? Maybe it was Eric Clapton. It's kind of comical almost, isn't it? Because you've got these sort of drug-addled rock stars. John's just done a song called Cold Turkey, but we don't know if he's already back on heroin or is he just on coke or whatever, whatever it is. But the documentary does a good job because they use animation as well, don't they?
Yeah,
they do a great job of turning it into this. What would you call it? It's almost like not a mystery, but it's almost like a caper. Caper is the word I was thinking.
A caper. That's a good way to put it.
It is scramble to get this thing on,
It is, and you've got it shows. So like, who do you want to play? Okay, well, Eric Clapton. Well, first I read that it was going to be George Harrison. That he asked George to play. So George said, no, I don't want to do it. So then he's like, okay, well, Eric will do it. And so then they show Eric Clapton, the little anime figure, going to the airport, and he's kind of like going, and then, we need a drummer. All right, well, Alan White. So then he sort of gets up and goes, and then Klaus going to play the bass, and then they're all like, and then John would actually say, oh, no, I don't think so. Even though these other guys are all off to the airport and ready to go.
It's funny, isn't it, in a way? Can we get this together without like blowing $20,000 or whatever?
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
All right, let's carry on with this. Plastic Ono Band, of course, never a fixed band. John used a pickup band. Yoko, Eric Clapton, as we said, Klaus Voormann, Alan White. I get the idea Klaus Voormann, Alan White probably weren't major druggies, so they're probably a bit more reliable, and you could kind of get them there, and they're solid professionals. And
that Klaus is like the consummate session guy who's just going to show up with the bass and his amp and ready to go. And Alan White was, he also seemed pretty straight and narrow, but EC, no way. And John, definitely not. So, and Yoko.
Klaus was like, just show me the chords and I will be there. Don't worry, John.
That's a good imitation of him.
He repeat the joke from last time you were on. He's got such a lovely accent, doesn't he?
He does.
He could say anything like, I'm going to the toilet to take a shit. And it somehow sounds dignified, you know?
It does. Yeah.
Excuse me for repeating the joke from back in 2020. But
that's great.
No, I listened to about half an hour of our last show. Just wanted a refresh.
Oh, yeah.
It was good. It was a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, though, wouldn't I?
Well, always fun. But yeah, it's amazing that this could even happen, given the status of them, and the fact that it wasn't like Bill Graham or some really well-known publicist or some guy who owns a big club or something. It's just two guys from Toronto and young kids. So it is kind of amazing that they were able to pull this off. But the sales, like you said, were really flagging. This was the rock and roll revival in this 1969. People didn't really care about Little Richard or Chuck Berry. They weren't the draw. So you needed something to do it.
Yeah, well, there was one thing actually. Chuck Berry had played at this Toronto Pop Festival. The one
did he?
Neither of us had heard of, from June.
Yeah.
And apparently he was so good that it was, I think it was John Brower, that's the name that people would know. He saw that and he thought, well, why don't we do a whole show of 50s people? So that's obviously that happened. And then I guess, the Doors aren't really a 50s influence band, but I guess they're a name. So
and the funny thing about the Doors is I don't know if this was mentioned in the movie or if I just saw it elsewhere, but it was right around the time when Jim Morrison was in trouble for indecency in Miami. And so I think maybe that's why he didn't want to be filmed or something, or he was kind of pissed off at everybody and they were in a mood.
Yeah, well, maybe also, because they'd had so many concerts cancelled and stuff. Which is amazing when you think about what actually happened or probably didn't happen. It's just so weird.
Oh, I know.
It just affects people so much, or promoters and stuff. But yeah, maybe if you look at it another way, maybe they were a bit more accepting because they needed the work, and
that's true.
It's a good opportunity, Looking at the Doors, John apparently had to sort out with the Doors who was going on last, which is almost exact a copy of what happened at Monterey with the Who and Jimi Hendrix, if you remember.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I did read one thing, and it was Lennon and Morrison sort of met but didn't make eye contact or something, and they had a conversation. I'm not sure about that. Have you ever? There was a question I wanted to ask you. Have we got any knowledge of the Beatles and the Doors ever meeting, like members of them?
I've never heard of that. They just seem to be in very different circles. Yeah. They didn't seem to meet up at all. I don't know. Yeah. That's a good question. Wouldn't that have been interesting? Like although the Dylan Lennon back of the car didn't really turn into much either. But to see John and Jim Morrison, that would be an interesting fly on the wall.
Yeah, the only thing I've got on it, there was a rumor that one of the Doors went to one of the White Album sessions, maybe Happiness and Warm Gun, but I think that was unsubstantiated. Maybe that got sort of conflated with Clapton, obviously going to While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And then the other one, years ago, I got this book called Enemy Originals, and it was original articles from the NME from the 60s. And the tone of them is very funny. They're all very, very innocent, Oh, this has got a nice beat. John's written a song about drug withdrawal. It's got a terrific beat and stuff like that. Yeah, stuff like that. But there wasn't
good for dancing.
But weirdly enough, there wasn't. Yeah, stuff like that, exactly. But there was a quote from John Lennon talking about Miami. Weirdly enough, he said, "Oh, I think because obviously John was into the naked thing and had done two versions. So Miami's like nothing, like not getting his dick out. It's nothing to John Lennon." And he said, it was a quote. I wish they'd gone the whole hog, and he should have stripped down naked. Or anyway, there you go.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. Eric had a heroin habit, as we know. He and John were definitely doing coke. And there was something from the Goldman book that turned up in this documentary where they say, "Oh, can we have? we need some Coke." And someone goes,
"That's
to
right,
6 Coca-Colas or something." He's like, "No." Yoko says, "No, Coke for the nose." Yeah. And sort of I alluded to earlier, he's just written a song called "Cold Turkey."
Right.
It's sort of feasible. He may have been on methadone, which is obviously the one that they take to get you off heroin.
Weren't there the stories? I think that I don't know if it was in that or so many things we've read through the years, but that over on the plane ride that he kept throwing up, that John was vomiting backstage and just having, whether it was withdrawals or he claimed it was nerves, but
it's so hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so hard to know. Could have been a combination. I don't know. But but definitely chemicals were flowing somewhere in him at that time.
That's it. It's a flood of chemicals. It's nerves, adrenaline, cocaine, and possibly heroin. Put those four together, and they may have had a joint or two. But yeah, clearly he's wired. I mean, that's the thing I remember when I saw Sweet Toronto when I was about 14. Yeah. That was part of this sort of 2 or 3 year. We all have this immersion course, don't we, where we block out about 4 years of our lives and just absorb nothing but Beatles.
That's right.
And I remember seeing this because obviously his beard and his hair are longer than ever because they obviously cut them by December when they went to Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
That was another smoking cure, wasn't it? Didn't work that time either. But yeah, it's never, I don't think and obviously the white suit, and he looks really, his eyes are very glazed. And honestly, he scared me a little bit when I was 14.
Well, and the it's at night. I think there's an ominous feel to that. And John does look kind of scary in a way.
He does,
like you can't, just see, all you see is that big beard, his glasses, his really long hair, and that white suit against the lights. And it's the Abbey Road suit. And it just kind of, there's an ominous feel to that whole event.
It is weird. I think also, even at the age of 14, I intuited as well that it sounded like it might fall apart at any time.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I knew a little bit of the backstory. If I feel like they get warmed up, we're actually going to go song by song later on.
Yeah.
But I felt like he was just sort of hanging on. And you can see, I think I even intuited as well that he seemed a bit kind of drug-addled or very nervous.
Yes.
It's pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And I was looking before we recorded today at the timing. So this was September 13th. So a week later, Abbey Road would come out.
Yes.
And supposedly this was, I think I read it in one of his interviews that he said, this was kind of what Toronto gave me the confidence to quit the Beatles. Yeah, the impetus to leave. And maybe that's part of the ominous feel. Like he's just kind of like in his own world at this point and doing his own thing. I don't know. There's something about it.
It is weird, isn't it? Because I sort of was looking at that as well. As you said, Abbey Road came out just after. And of course, in those days, obviously, it's a completely different world in terms of communications. And, a new Beatles album comes out. No one would have any idea. Okay, John Lennon's just done a concert, fair enough, a week earlier. But have any idea that, there was trouble at the mill, so to speak. There was another thing that came out. I'll see when I get to my notes. But famously, of course, they did this sort of unamplified sound check. And one nice thing in the documentary, we got Klaus Voormann's drawings of it.
Oh, yeah.
I think the only thing is the only sort of creative license, it looks more cramped in Klaus's animations or drawings, because there's actually photos of it and they look a bit more relaxed. In Klaus's one, there seem to be about 12 people all packed onto about 6 seats,
Yeah, exactly. There's also Klaus pictures of them on the plane or in the kind of rehearsing and different stages along the way.
Yeah. But clearly, they did. They were unamplified electric guitars, because I think Alan White said it was acoustic guitars, but I think just a slight misremembering of it. But I think the point, maybe to non-musicians, because you play music, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 12-bar blues is not that difficult to pull off.
No,
because
just give me the key and I can start. Yeah.
Yeah. Just in case, for non-musicians, basically 12-bar blues has a very particular chord progression, which involves 3 chords. So if someone says that in the key of A, blue suede shoes, it's not really that difficult to get something together.
No.
Now, of course, when you've just watched all your 50s heroes, and even Jim Morrison was watching Little Richard and saying, how the fuck are we going to follow that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a different kettle of fish to just, knocking out a tune in a rehearsal studio. But it's not like they had to learn loads and loads of chords for each song. That's the point.
No, and even their new, they do 2 Give Peace a Chance and Cold Turkey, 2 new songs. And those are very simple songs as well. They're only a couple chords, so it wasn't too tricky. And actually, Clapton had played on Cold Turkey, so he already knew it.
Oh, that was the other thing. Yeah, actually, I thought the recording had already been done, but I think the recording was at the end of September.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I was surprised about that, because I thought it came out in September.
I thought it was before that.
No, I think it was recorded in September and came out in October. So I suppose the public would be thinking, well, yeah, if Abbey Road's coming out, why has he just done a solo concert and a solo single?
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about. God, I've got so many notes here. Let's focus on Revival '69 a bit more closely. It's obviously there's quite fast-paced editing, isn't there?
Yeah.
And they constantly, because obviously a documentary needs a narrative, even if it's supposed to be truth as opposed to a film with actors. It needs something to hang on. And obviously you've got this caper idea of, can we get this together? There's a lot at stake. But the other thing is that it starts with an audio clip of John talking about leaving the Beatles. Obviously, like later on, he was saying that.
Yeah.
So they kind of do that as well. We get little videos of some of the performers turning up. You get Manzarek and Morrison. I mean, I'm a huge Doors fan. Are you a fairly big Doors fan?
I didn't used to be, because I played in a rock band that played only the hits. And so I got really tired of playing Hello, I Love You and Light My Fire. But recently I've been kind of maybe the last year, been listening a lot more to the Doors and reading more about Jim Morrison. And yeah, When the Music's Over has become just one of my favorite songs. And watching that 1968 Hollywood Bowl concert that's on YouTube just is like, oh my God, I can see why this guy is just, there's something. I mean, there's three great musicians and a very unique singer and frontman that nobody is like. So yeah, I look forward. Maybe we should chat some more offline about the Doors. I'd like to hear your recommendations.
And I'll have to start a music podcast and I can broaden it out a bit. Yeah, let's have another podcast. Why not?
Yeah. Let's do the Doors.
Yeah, with that Doors Hollywood Bowl, there's two things to know about that. Number one, he was tripping.
Oh, was he?
He was handling it fairly well. And number two, his girlfriend, Pamela, who was supposed to be like his soulmate, she was in the front row next to Mick Jagger, who I'm sure was just, putting the moves on her the whole evening. So
of course.
See why Jim Morrison's not really helping himself, is he?
No, he's not.
No, I like that concert. He's quite restrained in that concert.
He is. You said there is audio of the Doors at the Revival?
Yeah,
okay.
I've heard some of it. For me, there's not a huge difference between Doors concerts. They're great. You always get Light My Fire's about 15 minutes. The end is always about 15 minutes. And I love it, but there's sometimes a bit of a stamina test because obviously it's much better if you're there or if you're watching a film of it, But yeah, no, I love the Doors. So on this film, we've got Klaus Vormann, Alice Cooper, Robbie Krieger, obviously from the Doors, Anthony Fawcett, who sounds like unbelievably posh, my old mate Dan Richter, who's been on Glass Onion a few times.
Yeah.
The other thing was that some of this audio of John Lennon, you've got audio of them discussing it, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's pretty bizarre. I'd never heard any of that.
I've never heard that. No, they unearthed some really good stuff.
Yeah. It's like, where is all this stuff? Where's it come from? Why didn't anyone tell me before?
I know. No, there was some good finds in there.
Yeah. After everything you and I have done for the Beatles with our podcast,
I know. Why aren't they giving us these scoops?
Why aren't we getting free stuff? Yeah. Anyway, and then we get a little bit of obviously John talking about his love for 50s rockers, which is not a surprise. Brower and Ken Walker, these are the two partners you were talking about, had a concert promotion partnership. In their office, a very informal atmosphere. Apples and pears available for visitors. Brower and Walker had produced this Toronto concert in June. Performers there included the band, Ronnie Hawkins, Sly and the Family Stone, The Velvet Underground, Chuck Berry, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Steppenwolf, and Tiny Tim.
Wow, that's a pretty good lineup there.
I won't do my Tiny Tim impression. I'll insert a quick clip. Here we go.
Yesterday, all my troubles seemed so far away. Now I'm yearning for a hideaway. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why she had to go, I don't know, she didn't say. Have I done something wrong? Now I long for yesterday.
And as I was just saying, it was Berry's performance. Apparently, he'd really rocked out, and that was the idea for this. Alice Cooper's band got the gig by agreeing to also back Gene Vincent. Tickets weren't selling, reflecting the lack of relevance of the 50s guys, as you said earlier. They got the Doors for $25,000. The other thing I want to talk to you about, this Vagabonds Motorcycle Club.
Yeah.
It's like a sort of more benevolent version of the Hells Angels.
Hells
Altamont,
Angels. Right? Immediately what I thought this is Altamont here with the Hells Angels. But the guy, what was his name, Ron something? He seemed a little nicer than some of the Hells Angels guys. But he also got kind of nasty, too, in there as well when he didn't get what he wanted. But they had to clear it with the motorcycle gang.
Well, didn't they borrow the money from the leader? I think it was the $25,000 for the Doors.
For the Doors,
was borrowed from the leader of this motorcycle club.
Yeah.
So as we mentioned, the Doors 6 months ago had the Miami incident, which had really temporarily derailed their career. The show was about to be cancelled. Kim Foley had the idea of getting Lennon as MC. Anthony Fawcett, just 20 years old, was an art critic who became a close confidant of John and Yoko. Did everyone play for free as well? Is that right?
I don't know. I don't think
the Doors
so.
got $25,000.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they got paid for this one.
I think they said on here they had no money for John, but they offered him first class tickets.
That's right. And a hotel or something.
Is that right? Yeah. John rang up Alan White and said, "Oh, it's John Lennon here." And Alan White thought it was a gag and hung up on him. I think I'd heard that before.
Yeah.
There's a nice quote here. Someone says that Yoko said to John, "When you sing I Want to Hold Your Hand, millions of people will listen. Why don't you say something important?" Which is kind of nice, you know.
That's a good thing to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Radio DJ Russ Gibb, who I had heard of, promotes the concert as the second coming. There you go. And suddenly the tickets sell. Do we know how many were sold in the end? Because it wasn't as big as Woodstock, was it?
No, it wasn't as big. No, I'm not sure.
I'm guessing probably 30 or 40,000 perhaps.
Yeah. The stadium looked pretty big. And it's a big, probably sports stadium. And they would fit a lot of people.
Yeah.
And especially with that publicity. I remember the DJ was kind of blowing those guys off, like saying, forget it. You're not going to get John Lennon. Come on. I don't want to give you the time of day. And then eventually turned out to be really helpful for him. But it looks pretty crowded in the concert.
Yeah. It was one day, wasn't it? 12 hours. Yeah. D.A. Pennebaker actually called the office and offered to film the show. Probably didn't have to think twice. I don't know what D.A. Pennebaker's fee was, but I know.
Exactly.
He got a crew together at very short notice, as did John Lennon. Now, of course, one of the most amazing things, and I always remember this from Sweet Toronto, John Lennon gets an 80 motorbike Escort motorcade. 40 apparently it's 40 in front and 40 behind.
Yes.
So you saw the sandwich in the middle, which is just brilliant. And
just brilliant.
Some of the camera angles in this one and Sweet Toronto are just fantastic.
They show it,
going down the highway.
Yeah. And I should say some of the interviews with the crew are pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Because they're like, there's a woman in particular who's just very funny. She's like, we didn't know what we were doing. We're just go over there. It's like everything's totally chaotic and just a complete disaster. But it somehow all worked. And
it's very 60s, isn't it?
Very 60s. Yeah, exactly. Very 60s.
I mean, you get this idea, probably half the people in their office were probably high most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Like totally. Apple, you know, I mean, all the stories of Apple, you know, if you read The Longest Cocktail Party and all that, just like hash laid out on tables.
Oh, yeah.
Help yourself, you know.
Exactly.
As you said, the leader of the bike club threatens violence if Lennon doesn't appear. So, you know, the stakes are pretty high. They don't really need to dress it up too much because the stakes are already high. We sort of alluded to this. John Yoko wake up on the Saturday not feeling very well. I want to back out and send flowers, as you said. Klaus and Alan, you know, the more dependable ones are at the airport. Terry Doran, the man from the motor trade, brings Eric to the airport. John gets excited and agrees to come. This is a very potted version of this. We talked about the drawings and everything. Do you know much about Chicago, the band Chicago? They were Chicago Transit Authority, right?
They were. Yeah.
How big are they? How big were they, or are they?
They were extremely big in the 1970s and 80s. So they started out as so I'm from Chicago area, so they were kind of well known. They started out as a horn blues band, kind of like Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and had a really amazing guitarist named Terry Kapp. And then they did 29 or 25 or 6 to 4 and a couple of their early hits. But then their bassist, Peter Cetera, became really big in the 70s with more of the soft rock, adult-oriented stuff. And they became really popular in the 80s with very soft rock. But at this time, when they were on there, they had only recorded maybe 1 or 2 albums, and they were kind of making a name for themselves as a up-and-coming blues.
They got blues with horns here.
Yeah, blues with horn band, exactly. So that was a good get, I think, for them.
Yeah, as we said earlier, Alice Cooper was unknown.
And Alice Cooper, yeah.
We'll get to that later, but this was pretty much the concert that made him. There's a nice myth attached to it as well. We'll get to that. So the Plastic Ono Band, we're back on the plane again. They cobbled together a set list. As we mentioned earlier, I mean, it's 2 or 3 songs that he could almost do in his sleep, really.
Yeah.
And then a couple of originals, as you said, or 2 new songs, and then Yer Blues as well. And there's some great stories. The members of Rush drop acid and then go to the show. We get other people telling their stories. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of acid going around. But it seemed like the concert went off fairly well, as did Woodstock generally.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about Bo Diddley, because I love Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley's entire performance of this song is like din 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 Bo Diddley come dun dun dun. There seems to be like 2 lines to this song, but I still love it. Yeah.
Very minimalistic.
Yeah, but I've got this idea in my head that the only song Bo Diddley ever did was like ding 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 ding.
I think that's what he did, and he had that big square guitar. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. But what do you think about the sound? It seems like quite rough. Not necessarily Bo Diddley, but all of them really. It's quite rough, isn't it? But it seems
it is.
Bit.
Yeah,
nobody sounds too polished. Is what I'm saying.
No. There's sound not only in the actual audio, but the playing is kind of. There's some ragged moments. Like Chuck Berry is known for doing those kind of ragged things. I saw him a couple of years before he died in St. Louis. He used to play every week at Blueberry Hill, as a club in St. Louis, and they'd kind of wheel him out. And he'd play for a while, but in the chords, he'd usually be like a half step off, pretty rough. But, it was Chuck Berry, you deal with it. And same kind of thing. It's a style. It's his aura. But he gets his good licks, and he does his duck walk and all that. So all the usual things are there. And Little Richard sounds like Little Richard. And
he's a bit smoother, maybe.
Not as rough. Jerry Lee Lewis comes out and does Great Balls of Fire. Yeah, it's brilliant.
I love it.
Sounds great. And they're during the day, so I think it's a very different vibe. Do you feel like it's a different vibe since they're during the day and you can see the audience, whereas John's is all in the dark and all you see are lighters, and you don't see the people. It's a different feel.
I'm wondering, it seems like maybe it was only the Plastic Ono Band and the Doors that were on the evening, and obviously the Doors are just perfect for 11 at night or midnight or whatever. And it's a shame we don't have film, but as you said, the Hollywood Bowl one seems a bit brighter, but you can imagine this very kind of grainy footage of them playing at midnight would
perfect.
Would probably look brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so we've got Bo Diddley, Jerry Lee we've talked about. They just look so in command.
Yeah.
Bo Diddley you don't really see, he's just sort of doing his thing, but Jerry Lee and Chuck Berry, they just seem like so commanding. Like,
yeah. And Jerry Lee just comes out. He's got like a brown turtleneck on or something, and he just like says a few things and gets right to business. And it's great. And they had the band. It was a Canadian band, I think. Weren't they one of the group that backed him up or something? And,
they were backing Chuck Berry. Nucleus.
They were in Chuck Berry. Okay. Yeah. Nucleus. Yeah.
The drummer's just got a massive smile on his face. He's going,
he'll
I'm high as a kite, and I'm absolutely loving this. I'm playing with Chuck Berry. No idea what song he's playing, but
no.
That's what's so nice about it. I mean, presuming most of this is true, it seems like it is. There seems to be a real nice air around this concert.
Yeah,
like it's
good vibe.
Very Wild West. People are high. There's young kids getting to back their idols. It seems nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just one more thing with Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah, again, I think he's a fairly good piano player. It's quite basic. It's that sort of dan 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 dan, which is a style that I could do a little bit on the piano. But when he puts his foot on the piano and stuff.
Oh yeah,
he's just doing Jerry Lee Lewis.
It's his shtick. Yeah,
it's his shtick. Exactly. Yeah. The Nucleus drummer you mentioned said he was petrified, but as I said, looked fairly happy.
Yeah, he did.
Looked happy with life. Interestingly, we see Chuck Berry doing rock and roll music.
Yeah.
Yeah, because on the other one he does Johnny Be Good, I guess, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. That's what I remember, yeah.
And he's sort of using a bit of hippie language, talking about like dig this groove and stuff like that. Maybe he's trying to fit in, because as you said earlier, 10 years is a long time in rock and roll. If you think of possibly his peak was around 58, 59, I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah. The funny thing is all those guys weren't that much older than the Beatles, but they just seemed like a totally different generation. And yeah, Elvis was born in 37 maybe, or
no, Elvis is 35.
35. Yeah, maybe Chuck's.
I think Chuck was older, because I think Chuck was about 30 when he was writing about, being in his car chasing girls,
School days. Yeah.
School days, yeah. School days, I'm 30, yeah.
Sweet little 16, a little creepy.
God. Yeah. Right, the Doors arrive. This is just going by the film here. Of course, Jim Morrison has shaved his beard at this point, but of course, a few months earlier in the Miami, he looked very much like John Lennon, just without the glasses. So you can imagine if they'd met and he still looked like that. I don't know whether
a picture of them would be.
Yeah, that would have been great. Yeah, maybe if they swapped the glasses over and.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, as you said earlier, Jim Morrison. I mean, he's got a presence, and there's something about him, the same as Jimmy and Janis Joplin and John Lennon or whoever. One of the Nucleus guys, these are the guys that were backing Chuck Berry, spots Jim Morrison watching Chuck Berry. Robbie Krieger comments on the Duck Walk and calls it one of the best rock shows I've ever seen. Kim Fowley teases the crowd about his special guest. Was it mentioned on the radio that John Lennon was there?
I think it was.
Yeah, because that's how they got the tickets.
That's how they got the tickets. That's right.
Of course, yeah. Okay. The bike gang are waiting at the airport and getting loaded. I think it's just alcohol. These are my notes. When Lennon's plane lands, Lennon's plane lands and he enters by special entrance to avoid the crowds. There's some amazing photos of him in the limo, looking a bit bemused. The guy was called Edjo Leslie. That's the leader of the bike gang.
Mm-hmm.
I've got 80 bikes, go 2 by 2 like the animals in the Ark. Literally speed down the highway, running red lights. And the way it's shot is just, I just love it.
Very nice, yeah.
It's brilliant. The Plastic Ono Band enter their barren dressing room with 1 amp and just a hi-hat, snare and cymbal. They briefly rehearse. We've gone through the Coke thing already. Let's talk about Alice Cooper. Are you an Alice Cooper fan?
I own the Greatest Hits album that I bought for like $1 many years ago. And I kind of liked School's Out and I'm 18. But apart from that, I don't think I remember. I can't name another song, I don't think.
Yeah.
So not a big fan.
I'm about the same, really. I mean, it's good rock and roll. I'm sure they would have been fun to see. I've got Alice Cooper backs Gene Vincent of the band in their Barbarella gear. Oh, Barbarella. That's the film they were watching when they tripped out in.
That's right.
Yeah. Everything connects. And Alice Cooper, of course, was one of the Hollywood vampires as well in the 70s.
Yeah, with hanging out with John and Ringo and Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon. Yeah. Okay. I wonder if that's when John met Alice Cooper, or they kind of met for the first time, or I don't know what their background was.
History. But then if you think about John Lennon here and then John Lennon in 73, 74, again, it's just like 2 different people. It's like,
very different. Yeah.
Because here, I don't know, how would you describe him? He's almost like a slightly drugged out kind of apostle.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe him. The way he is here, he looks a bit wired. I can't imagine him sort of having a beer after the show. I don't know.
No, I don't think he's scary. I think there's something kind of scary about him. Yeah.
He seems like almost like a breed apart, almost. I guess because even in this documentary, they're talking about, the Beatle aura.
Right.
Everyone is in awe of this Beatle aura, it seems.
Yeah.
So I suppose he's just a part in the sense that he's up there, like fame-wise. And
well, especially that Beatle. It's like he only heard... I guess people say it about George, but really, if you've got John and Paul there, that's the Beatle aura at its top, and John even maybe the most, because it's John. So.
Yeah, without upsetting McCartney fans, it's more because Paul presents himself as more of an everyman.
Yes.
John doesn't. I don't know if he deliberately used to do this, but it's almost like he's presenting himself as something other. which kind of what he was genuinely. There is a story, of course, during the last weekend that John went to watch a Jerry Lee Lewis concert and was actually kissing his shoes when he met him.
Oh, really?
And Jerry Lee was going, "Don't worry there, son. Just relax, son." So I don't think Jerry Lee Lewis was in awe of John Lennon at all.
No.
Anyway, right. So somebody spots some feral chickens. I think we all know what's coming here. One of them is, I've got in my notes, is caught and retained for future use. I like the description of Alice Cooper's band, dark, hard rock, vaudeville. So it's a little bit scary and a little bit horror, gothic, but it's a bit vaudeville at the same time, yeah. I've got plays
campy.
Yeah, quite campy, yeah, you're right. Alice Cooper was a big Dali fan, so there's a bit of that. Alice releases a feathered pillow that looks like a snowstorm, watched by the Doors and John and Yoko. The chicken is brought out and let loose. Now, what's the myth? I always get this confused with Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, he bites the chicken's heads off, right?
Yeah,
wasn't that it?
Yeah, because the Ozzy Osbourne myth is that he bit the head off a bat. That may actually be true.
I could believe that more than Alice Cooper.
Yeah. So maybe those two have got conflated again somehow.
Yeah.
I've just got here, that night, Alice Cooper, the pantomime villain, is born and a career is made. John is backstage swapping autographs with his heroes. Little Richard wants the lights turned out. What about Little Richard's costume?
I know, it's quite a get-up he's got on.
Is it?
Mirror. Yeah.
What is going on there? Well, you were saying earlier, like he had a kind of a fall from grace, because in Complete Beatles they talk about that, don't they?
Yeah.
Jerry Lee Lewis married his cousin. Chuck Berry went to jail because of the Mann Act. So all those 50s heroes, not all of them, but Buddy Holly obviously died. Eddie Cochran died. You know, it went south for them for various reasons.
Little Richard found God and kind of got out of it, and then had conflicting sexuality issues, and so it was, I guess, tough being a pioneer in some ways. You're the first to do it.
Yeah, so you're there to be shot at, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think even back in Tune In, back in '62, he was sort of veering between the two. Little Richard, because he obviously realized that was his livelihood.
Yeah.
He sort of turned on rock and roll and then came back to it. I think can't imagine him being temperamental, but
no.
As I said earlier, according to Robbie Krieger, Jim turns to him and says, we got to follow that for Little Richard. So they were obviously quite impressed. John appears, as we've said, nervous. Don't know what the band are feeling. Didn't Alan White, they didn't have a sound check. And he didn't know, he'd never played that kit, had he?
No.
I mean, I've never been a drummer. Is that a big problem, or is it?
I hear drummers talk about that they don't feel right on somebody else's kit. I don't know. I guess if I'm playing somebody else's guitar, if I don't know that type of guitar, I might have a different feel. Yeah, you always feel better on your own instrument, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's the thing about this, the kind of magic of this concert, I don't know if this is planned, is that it's all, as you said earlier, it's all seemingly ragged.
Yeah.
Maybe there are a couple of performers that weren't. I don't know. So John appearing nervous, maybe high, not rehearsed, it fits in a weird way, but I'm sure he didn't plan it that way.
No, I was thinking during the movie, he's got an overseas flight and it's the same day.
Yeah, as well.
I know it's not as bad. I just came back from Europe. It's definitely not as bad going west than it is going east, but to be up that night and play a gig I think he had to be on something to help push through, maybe cocaine or some stimulant just to keep up. Because I'm falling asleep the night when I get home at 2 p.m, I'm falling asleep. So,
how long is the flight roughly from Toronto to London? What are we talking about? 7 hours?
Probably 6-7 hours. Yeah.
Well, it's no small thing, is it?
No.
They probably didn't have the same entertainment on the flight.
That's true. It wasn't.
It wasn't 100 films to choose from. But.
Exactly. And they weren't sleeping on the plane. They were rehearsing. So.
Yeah. I've got here, Kim Fowley creates a moment. You mentioned this earlier with the idea of the lighters. So that may be the first time that was ever done.
Could be.
Which is, that's one legacy of this concert.
I do wish they'd had Eric Clapton interviewed. He wasn't in the movie. The others, White and Vorman, were, but I wish they'd had Clapton's remembrances. I don't know if he's spoken about it, or I'd be interested to hear what he thinks.
Well, I read Philip Norman's biography of him, which is pretty good. I think I had it, and then I listened to the audio book later on. And yeah, I don't remember him even mentioning it. I know it's weird. Maybe he doesn't remember it.
Yeah, maybe.
John does his famous line. I might put a clip.
Okay, we're just going to do numbers that we know, because we've never played together before.
We'll go song by song in a bit, but what do you think of his set overall? Maybe comparing to the other people at the event.
Well, given the impromptu nature of it, I think it's probably appropriate. So you had Your Blues, which Clapton knew because he played on the Dirty Mac version in the Rock and Roll Circus, so he knew that tune. You had the two new ones. You had to do Give Peace a Chance because that's what it was for, peace. And then the other two, Dizzy Miss Lizzy and Money and Blue Suede Shoes were just all rock and roll standards. Anybody could play them. So for what they were, for that type of gig with no rehearsal, about right.
Yeah,
you're not going to pull out I'm So Tired or Strawberry Fields or I don't know, whatever John would have he could have done Come Together maybe. That was in his head at the time.
That would have been a good exclusive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would. Yeah, here's a song coming off our next. Well, but then he wasn't the Beatles there. He wanted his own. I guess, but Your Blues is a Beatles song, so I don't know.
Could have pulled that one out. Yeah, definitely. The audio seems to have been cleaned up because I've listened to the audio and it sounds way better than it did. I hope they haven't sweetened it. It sounds way better than it does on the film. Yeah, it
did. I read actually that John went into the studio before it was released and fiddled with some stuff. Yeah, sweetened it up. Yeah, and I think actually part of it was turning Yoko down because she makes an appearance, maybe an unwelcome appearance on a couple of their tunes before she does her own. But John did, there was some work done on the album.
Well, of course, when they did Shea Stadium.
Yeah, that too.
This is in the Chronicle, Mark Lewison's book. Early 66, they stood in the studio in front of the video and tried to imagine they were still playing it. So they said, don't make it too smooth, obviously. Yeah. Make it a bit better, but make it still a bit ragged.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, that's fairly standard, right? Do you think most
I think
live
it
bands
is too. Yeah, there's very rare that you have it completely without any touches. McCartney was famous for doing that. When I first learned about Wings Over America and first heard that album, I was, oh, they're so good. And then years later, I read that, they went in and Paul overdubbed his bass and Denny came in and played some parts and they cleaned some stuff up and some vocals, re-recorded some backgrounds. And
I suppose it's fair enough because you have to compensate for the fact that you can't be seen.
Right.
Because obviously when you see somebody, if their playing is not that amazing, you've got the added, I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about being like miles back at a concert, but let's say a concert film, you've got the visuals, so the audio maybe doesn't have to be that good.
Yeah, you've got the vibe. You're there.
Yeah, you got the vibe. That's it. But yeah, I think he sort of gets warmed up. My argument with his set is that apart from Blue Suede Shoes, there's probably better versions of every one of these songs involving him. So if you think, obviously, Money, sounds great on the BBC, Your Blues at the Rock and Roll Circus. I liken it a bit to, if you've ever heard Dylan at the Isle of Wight, which of course was only a few months earlier.
Right.
There's too much anticipation. Yeah, there's an amazing photo of three of them, isn't it?
Yeah, John and George and Ringo,
Yeah, and again, just loads of hair and loads of beards. But they look like students, just lying down in the field.
Yeah, learning from the master there.
Yeah, but I think there was too much anticipation of that.
That's a real spotty show, too. Yeah. That's another topic, but the band and it's interesting. It took them a while to get going, it seemed. Yeah.
But I mean, Jim Morrison insisted on having a decent seat or he was standing to the side so you get a good view of John Lennon. I get the feeling, I think the vibes were so good at this concert that I don't think his rivals are there to watch him fail. I think they're kind of willing him over the line. So probably in their mind, as long as he's not too bad, they're going to love it, because it's just the aura.
It's the first time you'd had a solo Beatle playing live in a concert, really, since they stopped touring. Rock and Roll Circus wasn't a live concert, so this is a different thing to actually have a Beatle doing his own thing.
So I think I mean there was a bit of booing later on, I think, with Yoko. And my whole thing with Yoko is if she starts screaming during, say, Yeah Blues or Cold Turkey, it's not too bad because John's kind of screaming as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's when she's screaming, obviously the famous one with Chuck Berry, Johnny Be Good, because it's got no relationship to it. It's almost for the sake of it, you know?
Yeah. Or the one they did with Frank Zappa on Sometime in New York City. You know I love you, baby, please don't go.
Yeah.
And then you hear her wailing in the background. It's just, it's not right.
The only one thing I'll give her credit on that song, she wails after the vocals. So it's almost like
That's true.
A guitar lick, but there's already a guitar lick. You don't need.
That's true.
It's like, you know, I love you, baby, please don't go.
That's
so
true.
fair enough there, but yeah,
fair enough.
But I think, but on maybe Cold Turkey, it kind of works, and in this atmosphere, because it's a very heavy atmosphere anyway.
Well, we should say that if you've never seen this before, what are they? So Yoko, what is she looking like? So first, I think Eric looks pretty cool. He's got like a denim shirt on and jeans or something. And then Klaus, you don't see much of Klaus, but he's
what they're wearing. Yeah,
I don't know.
You don't really see
Alan White. Yeah. You don't see them much. But then Yoko's in a bag. She puts the bag and takes the microphone in the bag. Yeah, and then she appears. It's very weird that they kiss and they talk to each other. It's very unusual.
The other thing I noticed is that she's carrying the lyrics, you know, and he's having to like check in with the lyrics. That's the thing I remembered, as I said, when I was 14 and I watched Sweet Child. So I remember that thinking, why doesn't he know the words to his own songs?
Yeah. I read a bad review of the concert, and the person was saying John was so lazy he couldn't even learn the words for like basic rock songs. Here he had to have Yoko looking. And then I thought, well, he did the same thing on the rooftop concert with Dig a Pony. He said, can you get the words? And there's the gopher is holding the words.
Yeah, the guy with the ginger hair, isn't
the guy with the ginger hair? Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, because on the Ruttles one, Ron Nasty actually boots him off the roof, doesn't he? Do you remember that?
That's right.
Just before they get up and go. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, they do rock covers, and then this is on Revival 69. So Sweet Toronto is a bit more of a kind of concert film.
Yeah,
in the sense that we get every song. So we could talk about that as well later on. But he debuts Cold Turkey, kind of a funky version, you know, the 2 or 3 chords, and it's got a nice groove. I do like this one, yeah. You're thinking, like, is this guy actually off heroin or not? You know,
not sure.
I mean, it's just so perfect for John Lennon, isn't it? Like being high on heroin, talking about withdrawing from it. That's perfect. And then they do cut to Eric Clapton a few times, looking a bit bemused. He's looking over like,
the best is during, well, we'll get to it, but during Yoko's stuff, he really kind of looks over like, what am I doing here? Is this, what's going on?
Yeah, but I know something interesting. Do you remember at the Rock and Roll Circus, that thing with the violinist? The whole lot of Yoko. I didn't think it really worked. It wasn't really Yoko's fault. But it's interesting. On that one, he obviously gets them doing that rock riff, like don, 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 don. And here you've got what's basically the Wake Up Little Susie riff, you know. Dun, 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 dun. That was quite a nice idea, I suppose, to have the band just do that, because then they're not going to get lost. It's just basically doing that riff, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it can get quite boring. I mean, I remember I did a project on John Lennon when I was at school, again, probably about 14, 15. And I played a few songs from this and I was talking about it, kind of like we're doing now, but 35 years ago. And then I remember we left the tape running, left the video running, and Yoko was doing her thing. And I remember people at school, my schoolmates, just getting really angry. It's interesting that it gets that angry response because it's not in any of our comfort zones, you know, if we're into rock.
No.
They were really angry. What is this? Like,
what is this?
Turn this off. You know? Yeah. I don't know. Why did people get angry? And I can understand why they'd ridicule it or not like it, but why does it make people angry? I don't know.
Well, I still remember the first time I saw this video. Sweet Toronto was at a Beatle Fest. Now it's Fest for Beatle fans, but in Chicago when I was in high school, like probably around your age, when I was like 14 or 15. They had a video room and the room was packed. I'd never seen this before. So everyone was sitting there watching the John stuff. And then John says, now Yoko's going to do a thing all over you.
Oh, that's brilliant. Great line.
Yeah. And then I saw people started to get up and walk out. And by the end, I walked, I think with my mother, and I went with my mother, we left. And then we walked past the room and we heard her, and there was no one in the
Oh, yeah.
By that point, because she just cleared the room with her stuff. So I don't know if anger is the feeling I would have. It's just more bewilderment and kind of just, this is just really noisy and hard to listen to.
Yeah. Well, I always say that if John Lennon was around, I'd like to say to him, you know, you think Smile is a great idea for a film. So it's obviously him smiling at very, very slow speed. So I don't know how long it is, an hour or whatever. But have you sat through it?
Oh, yeah. How
be honest. Would you like to sit through an hour of you smiling? I like the idea. I've got no problem with the concept. I like conceptual art. I think Yoko had loads of great ideas, and Madeline Boccaro wrote that book.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I never really felt angry. I don't know. Anger is a strange emotion to have.
Mm-hmm.
I've just got in my notes here. Yeah, John tells the crowd to wake up. Do you remember that bit where he goes, come on,
he says, wake up. Is that after Cold Turkey? Or
I think it might have been, yeah. Because he's acting really weirdly. He does a little bit of sort of Elvis dancing.
He dances,
yeah. And then another one, he goes, eins, frei, eins, zwei, drei, vier. But he sort of says it. He just looks really mad, like wild-eyed. And that's why, you know, I found him scary.
It's scary. It's like glassy-eyed through the glasses and the,
Yeah. Okay, Krieger and others talk about Yoko in the bag. I put here, all looks jerky and chaotic, about to fall apart. Then they do Give Peace a Chance with the German count-in. Mention is made of the Canadian bedding and John's apparent love for Canada. Was it December they went to Canada and you met Trudeau?
Yeah, that's right.
And Marshall
December.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like John then. He seems quite calm, and I guess he did like Canada, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Have you spent much time in Canada? Have you been there?
I've been to the two main cities. I've been to Montreal a couple times and Toronto, and I like them. Yeah, they're nice. Feels like a big American city, but with a little bit more refinement in some ways.
Yeah. They didn't say it in this documentary, but I guess Canadian Woodstock would be the phrase, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Or an attempt at it. But it's obviously a bit smaller because it's only one day.
That's true. But in Montreal, I did actually go up to the room in the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. I was there for a conference, and I went away from the conference and found the hotel and went up to the room and in the hotel, and it says John Lennon and Yoko Ono on the door. So I think you can probably rent the suite. And
you didn't rent it?
Pay it? No, I couldn't.
Oh, come on! What kind of dedicated Beatles fan are you?
I know. I must hate the Beatles. Yeah, I know.
I thought you were going to say that the conference was in that room. That would have been. Great.
I wish.
You could have whipped out your guitar. 1, 2,
I know.
3, 4. Oh wow, that's great. So you had a conference in the same hotel?
It was right next door.
Oh, next door.
So it was right there.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So of course, Beatle fan, you put 2 and 2 together, and you're walking to lunch, and you see Queen Elizabeth Hotel, and like, wait a minute, I know what happened here. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because they do a thing, don't they, where they leave the lights on? Is it on the anniversary, or maybe the anniversary?
I think, of the recording.
Yeah, because they do the same thing in Mendips, you know, the house we've both been to. They leave the bedroom light on, and then someone posted the comment and said that's not very good for the environment, isn't it?
No,
you can't please anybody. No. Yoko does "Don't Worry, Kyoko" with this 50s rock riff, which you talked about. I'm just going to play a quick clip of Klaus Voormann talking about his interpretation of Yoko's screaming.
The audience loved it. It was great. I think they were very polite too. In particular, when Yoko came and was singing, then it was very, very hard. You know, if it wasn't John, I think they would have thrown tomatoes on stage. And it's funny because me standing behind Yoko, I got a completely different feeling. Because for me, it was an amazing thing she was doing. She was screaming, and I really felt she was trying everything to express this hurt and this wish to have peace on earth. And I think that's, you have to say one up for Yoko, you know.
Obviously it's Vietnam, and like he said, she sounded like a dying bird. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not. But
I don't know. It's like a dying bird. Yeah. You do a great Klaus.
Thank you, yes. I'll be working on it. John makes a comment that many people walked out, but the ones who got it really got it. So it's that idea that, like, if you stay there, you're quite a diehard. And, let's not be coy about it. Obviously, there were drugs going around, and I can imagine if you're in a certain state, you might be really digging probably the feedback as well. At the end, we've already talked about John, white suit, black top, granny glasses. He's very thin. It sort of adds to the whole effect. They lean the guitars on the amps, the single relentless noise echoing Yoko's scream. So it does kind of fit because the feedback is not a million miles away from what she's doing, because it's one continuous note, if you like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the ending is just, again, part of the whole chaotic nature of the whole thing. You've got, John and Eric put their guitars up against the amp, and then they light cigarettes on stage, which is right on camera. And then they just walk away, and then you just hear that note. And then in the movie, you see the credits go up over that.
Yeah. It's really good, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah, I kind of like that part of it. But I don't like the relentless. It's just a lot to handle. And so the joke is that on the album Live Peace in Toronto, the first side was played a lot. You'd see used record stores and you'd find it there. The first side would be worn out and the second would be like virgin vinyl, never played for the Yoko stuff.
And is the album the complete performance?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not edited. Oh, good.
No,
good.
It's got all of it's just the sweetened up a little bit version. But yeah, it's all there.
Still blows our minds.
Yeah.
Now, the end of the revival one, the Doors actually started their concert with the end, which might sound a bit ironic.
Yeah.
I don't know if they used to necessarily play at the end of their gigs. I don't know. They probably didn't have a set pattern. And Jim Morrison kind of gets the last word here. He talks of rock and roll in the 1950s being a liberating experience.
I can remember when rock and roll first came on the scene. And for me, it was a very liberating experience because it burst open whole new strange catacombs of wisdom that I couldn't remember and I didn't know about and I couldn't see any equivalent for in my surroundings. And that's why for me this evening it's been really a great honor to perform on the same stage with so many illustrious musical geniuses. This is the end, beautiful friend.
It was nice to hear him being quite humble.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine one kind of version of Jim Morrison would be have a bit of disdain and say, oh, these 50s rockers. But clearly he's not like that, I don't think.
No. Like I said, I've been watching some Doors footage and interviews with him, and he actually comes off as not like he's portrayed. Like he's seems like a pretty quiet, spoken, thoughtful person when he's interviewed.
Yeah.
And kind of shy. But maybe it's like those people just get on stage and become somebody else. Or they
I think you've got it. I think that's it. Because Jimi Hendrix is very similar. So many people will tell you that he was just fairly quiet bloke.
Yeah.
And
like
quite
a nice
gentle.
Dude.
But then he just obviously had something he had to channel. And he created they're almost like creating a character, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still them, but it's a sort of extension of it. We've got a couple of other. Oh, this is a funny thing about the Doors. Chuck Berry apparently tried to get on stage with them during their set. I don't think this was in the film. And Jim said, quote, Chuck, you never let kids jam with you. Be nicer to kids and maybe someday we'll let you jam with us.
Oh, that's a good one.
I don't know if that's true, but I like it.
I don't know. It's a good story.
Yeah, then the film ends. We got clips of the great rockers and the Plastic Ono Band. Oh, have you seen the photos with them in the T-shirts?
Yeah, with the T-shirt. Yeah.
They're pretty cool. The yellow T-shirts.
That's cool.
And again, all just looking so thin. Like
it's very thin, like emaciated. Eric is really thin. Yeah.
Yeah, Klaus.
Yep.
They talk of history and the moment that transformed rock and roll.
Not sure about that.
I don't know. Maybe as Canadians, there's some sort of pressure to big this up a bit.
From their perspective.
I asked you about Canada, is there I'm asking you to completely generalize, but is there a thing in Canadian culture where they are maybe trying to separate themselves from American culture?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I was in graduate school, I shared an office with someone from Toronto, and he said we were talking about what it's like to be Canadian near America and vice versa. And he said, well, being Canadian is like having a big brother who gets everything.
Yeah.
And you get kind of what's left.
Yeah.
You're the second child. And so I thought, oh, okay. And this, if you look at this concert, well, we only talk about Woodstock, and even though this was, and that the one in June of '69 was quite a big get too.
Yeah.
But you don't know about it because we're very U.S. centric in our perspective on things. So
I mean, it just dominates culture.
Yeah, it dominates
good and
culture.
bad.
Right.
America dominates culture.
Exactly.
Just written here, Canadian Woodstock. Right, everybody, I think we're going to leave it there for part one. Clearly, this is going to be a two-parter. We've still got quite a lot to cover.
Yep.
We're having a lot of fun, lots of tangents, which is absolutely fine.
Oh,
That's what Glass Onion was built on, How else do you think it's lasted 5.5 years? Yeah, Dave, thanks a lot. And you'll be back for part two, hopefully, will you?
Absolutely, looking forward to it. And I gotta keep thinking about that long hair and the white suit and the scary John. I gotta put this more, think about this some more, and then think about his how he's playing too, and how he sounds.
Don't let it give you nightmares.
It'll give you nightmares, but yeah, we'll look forward to part two.
All right, excellent. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you soon for part two, the Glass Onion episode 102. So goodbye for now.
Take this, brother. May it serve you well.